Hi, everyone. Welcome again to another amazing episode of Atheists Having Cocktails with Christians. I am super stoked to sit down first time talking with Brian Khairullah, legendary bass player from Deliverance, who, in my opinion, was on one of the top three Christian metal albums of all time. And luckily, I've gotten to do, like if you've been watching, Jimmy from Deliverance, George from Deliverance, Manny from Deliverance, Glenn Rogers from Deliverance. So now I get the bass player extraordinaire. So man, thank you for doing the show, and man, just let's have a good conversation and have a good time, brother.
Well, thank you for inviting me. This is really cool.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. Well, tell me about what you're doing today. Where's Brian Khairullah at in 2024?
Oh, mostly just working and day-to-day stuff. That's about it. Nothing too exciting.
What do you do for a living now?
Um, I um, I I've been in the electrical industry for decades, as an electrician, as a trainer, as a instructor. So it all revolves around that. So it's still part of the electrical industry.
Nice, nice. Where are you located? I'm in Kansas City. So are you
Yeah,
Southern California, or are you somewhere else?
I'm in Southern California, over Inland Empire area.
Oh, okay, over by Palm Springs. Beautiful. Love Palm Springs.
Yeah, a little closer to the mountains than Palm Springs, but
Nice. That's great. That's great. Are you still playing any music? I mean, have you?
intermittently. Yeah, I jam with friends every once in a while. Play with a band every once in a while. Try to do some recording. Um, I was in a band called Cantation for a few years. Um, uh, so when their bass player is unable to play one of their shows, I'll sit in. I'll fill in.
Did you say incantation or cantation?
Cantation with a K.
Okay, okay. Because there's the very popular kind of like death metal band Incantation. I was like, whoa, are you playing with those guys? Those guys
Oh,
go.
no, not that. Hey, they're local. They're from around here. They're originated in the high desert. They got a couple albums out. It's good. It's power metal, cool stuff.
Right.
Great bunch of guys.
Nice, nice. That's fun, man. That's awesome. All right, so I'm gonna bring it back to we're gonna go back in time at this point in time, man. Tell me a little about your upbringing. Were you raised in a Christian home? Were you a secular home, or just kind of give me some info on your youth?
Okay, yeah, it was definitely a Christian home, kind of on and off. But there was church involved from a very young age, and kind of encouraged to follow that path.
Mhm.
So the earliest memories, my grandfather was an elder at the church. It was like Anglican church,
Okay.
because carried over from where they came from, and the English influence during the colonization period.
Mhm.
So
Church of
that
England kind of stuff.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. So you definitely were raised in the church.
Yeah, yeah, I was. And in fact, with all the stuff that goes along with it. So, and that's it kind of leads into everything else from the they have what do they call it? Confirmation.
Mhm.
I think it's similar to
Catechism with
yeah,
Catholics.
yeah, yeah. So starting around at age 15, I went through it. I didn't really want to. It was my mom, you know, pushed me through, made me do that. But at the end of all of that, she gave me a Bible,
Mhm.
and she said you should read some of it every day. Well, I read a lot. I read constantly. I would hang out at the library. I'd read all kinds of stuff, uh, science fiction, history, uh, just a lot. And so it was just kind of natural for me to like, okay, fine, I'll read it. So I started reading it, and got through the whole thing,
Mhm.
just starting at Genesis all the way to Revelation, and then just started again. But this was before I actually got into it. I was reading lots of other stuff too that was
Definitely.
probably like the opposite of what that was. So,
Mhm.
um, you know, kind of dabbling in reading stuff like, you know, this is high school teen
Yeah.
stuff. You get all kinds of uh, things you want to read, get curious, especially when you start reading things about Jimmy Page and
Mhm.
people like that, and going, oh, okay, well, I want to read up about Aleister Crowley. I want to
Very
read
much
up
so.
about,
Yeah. Yeah.
and, all this other stuff. So I was all over the place, but that was just part of it.
Hmm. No, I agree. Like when I first started reading, I grew up in an evangelical house, and my probably around like freshman year is when I really started just kind of questioning a lot of my faith and whatnot. And then I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but like you're at this point you're not a Christian, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Whatever term you want to call yourself, you call yourself. But at this point, you're the same as me. You will be the second person I've had on the show that is not a Christian or a believer of some sort. But yeah, like I remember, in eighth grade when I was, checked out the Satanic Bible and read it for the first time, just because I was curious to see what it had to say. Oh, my parents freaked when they found it. They were like, what are you doing? I'm like, man, like, you just like it's just an interesting book. And at that point in time, I'd already just kind of started to walk away a little bit, not 100%, but just definitely wanted to learn more about other religions to see why I was claiming what I believed at that time.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned that because some friends of mine were out in, you know, the same high school time period. We went to some kind of, I can't remember what kind of store it was. You know, like um, you know, just a store that had a bunch of junk, just
Mm-hmm.
stuff. I mean, like kind of like like a big drugstore, but also it had books and
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So they had this bargain book thing, and we were like digging through that and see what they had, and there it was, the Satanic Bible. So so of course we had to get it,
Yeah,
kind of flip through.
definitely. I mean, and at that point, were you kind of already searching for something else, or maybe not even searching is a word, but just like curious to where what's the big fuss about this book that everyone says is so inherently written in the devil's blood, obviously. That just it was written by a showman, a secular humanist, and I've actually talked with Christians. If you put the satanic tenets up against the Ten Commandments, the satanic tenets honestly are a little bit more humane, a little bit more just than what I would consider the Ten Commandments to be. So
Oh yeah, yeah. The seven tenets of the Satanic Temple.
mhm.
Those tenets. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
you know,
Yeah, and that's because if and it's funny that, you know, bringing that up because well, reading through. So so I started out, you know, being raised as Christian, and then having that kind of pushed into me. And so from a young age, of course, when we started at this young age, we end up accepting a lot of things that maybe we wouldn't if it was presented to us later on in life.
I
And
agree.
um, and so at this point in my teen years, I hadn't quite gotten to that point where I made any decision either way. It was because later on in my early 20s, I had other influences and I kind of got more serious into Christianity. But during that time, reading through the Bible as a teenager, came across things like the Ten Commandments.
Mhm.
Actually, the accepted Ten Commandments that I'd first you know, seen those. The Gideon's Bible people came by my school when I was like fifth grade, you know, 10-year-old,
Mhm.
and handed out these Bibles. And of course, all of the kids in there, it's King James. So 10-year-olds, they're reading, um, they're reading the parts that'll make them laugh the most, like don't covet your neighbor's ass.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
so all of my 10-year-old friends were finding that part hilarious because it's in the King James. That's just how it was written. But then starting to read through the first time when you get through Exodus and you get to Exodus 34, I'm sure you're familiar with that, where it's got a different set of 10 commandments.
Yeah.
And the Exodus 21 is what everybody is familiar with, but it doesn't match the story. It doesn't match the story with Moses going up on the mountain and talking to God by himself and getting the stone tablets. It's a completely different story, where the voice of God is speaking to all of the people, and then at the end they say, you know what? Don't let him talk to us anymore. He's going to kill us. You talk to him by yourself.
Exactly. Then he went up to Mount Sinai and communed with God to get, he was up there 40 days. And then by the time everyone thought he was, already maybe demolished or dead, they had been, doing the calf. And then he comes back and breaks the tablets and then has to go back up and get them redone. So,
yeah.
Which has a big tendency of Mormonism with that, with Joseph Smith, where, the angel, gave him the tablets and then he let, somebody read it and it didn't match. Therefore, he broke it and had to go rewrite it again. There's so many similarities within every culture of religion where they don't realize, or if, where they don't want to realize that everything's been ripped off from something else, including the divine conception story of Jesus. That's happened.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Mithra and, Shiva and, all sorts of other Mediterranean gods that were around 1,000, 2,000 years before Christ.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So it's a lot of just adapted ideas that were around before. But then when we get to Exodus 34, that's where there's nowhere where he gets the first set of stone tablets. Exodus 34 is where he's getting the replacement set.
Yeah.
And it's a completely different set of commandments, right? They're mostly dealing with the festivals and feasts and stuff, except for the first 4 that are dealing with God's fragile ego. And then the last one, which says, don't boil a young goat in its own mother's milk.
Which could be delicious. I don't know if it's not.
Yeah, I wouldn't know. But then at the end of that, God says to Moses, "These are my 10 commandments." So it's not the same. And another thing that with the accepted set from Exodus 20, the second one says, make no graven images, right? No graven images of anything that's in heaven, on the earth, under the earth, and so on. But that's the one people want to make graven images of and stick on the front lawns of courthouses.
The biggest graven image is what we use every day. We call currency, which is money.
Yeah. So any of that. So it's ironic that a rule that says don't do this is what they want to do.
No, I agree. I agree 100%, man. I agree. Well, let me ask you this. So, what was we'll kind of get a little lighter and get back into it.
Yeah.
Your musical influences, like, how did you end up in Deliverance? Tell me your journey from starting playing to being on, like I said, and this is not me, kissing anybody's ass, but like honestly, man, Weapons is, in my opinion, and me and Jimmy were just talking about this down in Springfield this weekend. I went down and saw them play that festival, the Chains on Chains thing, and it was only 2 hours for me. So I was like, man, I'll go hang out with them, and got to hang out with George Ochoa, who I hadn't seen since the Sanctuary days, and they have Jim Chafin from Crucified playing, and I've got to interview Manny before and got to meet him and their new guitar player Dan, who was just fantastic. So we had a great time just hanging out talking, but just I mean, like I said, like Weapons is the master of puppets of Christian metal. It really is. I mean, it's just, I put the 3 top ones would be, obviously, for just because they started it before anybody, Tell It the Devil from Stryper, Vengeance Rising, Human Sacrifice, and then Weapons. I mean, those are the top 3. That's what started the movement, the genre, the everything, in my personal lowly opinion. So,
sure. Well, where should I start?
Tell me what kind of, like, when you were growing up, like, did you like thrash? Did you like punk? Did you like new wave? I mean, obviously everyone's gonna say,
Yeah.
you guys are older than me, like obviously Sabbath and like, and don't get me wrong, man, I love Iron Maiden and like Priest and a lot of bands, but like I was of the age where like when I found extreme metal, it was in the mid '90s, so therefore I was listening to more like Suicidal and Slayer, and I wanted extreme. Like, and I liked the other stuff, but for me, I wanted the more like intense stuff. That was kind of Repulsion, Morbid Angel, Deicide, Cannibal Corpse. Those were the kind of metal bands I was really into, and still am into. From a young age, I wanted really aggressive metal, other than Barren Cross and White Cross and Holy Soldier. The glam stuff it just was never my thing.
Yeah, I think for me, when I first started getting into metal, it was what was around wasn't anything like what we've got now, or even in the 80s, because it was the 70s, right? So so it was like Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin,
Yeah.
um, and there were um, let's see, Rush was a big one. I mean, these aren't, so I wasn't really into thrash really didn't exist at
Exactly.
that time. So,
Yeah.
Ozzy, Deep Purple was a big one. Deep Purple was really good. And so then in the early 80s, it just started getting heavier and heavier. And
Motorheads, the Venoms,
yeah, exactly. Motorhead and I remember the very first time I heard Metallica was probably Kill 'Em All, and about the same time I heard Venom and Slayer. It was a friend of mine came over to record some stuff. He had these albums, he wanted to put them on cassette, and it was like I'd never seen anything or heard anything like that. Um, and at the time I was living in LA, hanging out with a lot of people over in the Venice area, Culver City area, and so there were a lot of people in the suicidal tendencies.
Oh yeah.
Um,
No,
and
oh man, No Mercy, Beowulf.
yeah, yes, yeah. Saw
All those
Beowulf at a
Venice bands.
backyard party.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so it was cool. Um, but I think um, I didn't really listen to a whole lot more. Um, I wasn't into Christian music at that time, but then I started making a change. There were some things that were influencing me, some family members and other people, and so I started looking around, and so somebody gave me a demo of Blood Goods,
Mhm.
before their first album, and so I started listening to that, and then started hanging out with Christian musicians. Started going to Whittier Sanctuary. There were there were other churches I went to. It was I was going to a church in the South Bay area,
Mhm.
and then some people came down, in fact, including Steve Valdez, and invited me to the Whittier Sanctuary. So
Who
I
was
went over
Steve
there.
Valdez?
Steve Valdez, he was um, he he was like he was part of the Striper group,
Okay, okay.
and he became a pastor. And so when that sanctuary started in Whittier, it was Bob Beeman and Steve Valdez,
Okay.
and then
So
and
Steve
then Bob.
Valdez, the name's familiar. He came from like a Calvary Chapel, like
I,
in Costa Mesa, right?
yeah, I think so. I'm not sure exactly, but
It's in here, but that sounds
possibly.
familiar.
Yeah, because then when Bob expanded to South Bay before Hollywood, and then they started expanding all over, um, but Steve stayed at Whittier location, and Bob moved to the South Bay, opened the South Bay Sanctuary,
Mhm.
and so around that time, I was hanging around a lot with Larry
Yeah,
Farkas
yeah. Super
and
nice guy.
and Doug Thiem. And in
Mhm.
fact, so when I first joined Deliverance, I was living in LA, and then during that period, Doug and I rented a house next door to Bob in South Bay. So I, it was like we I was we were talking about starting a band with me and Larry and Doug and Roger Martin. And in fact, we kind of did a thing with Sanctuary that they called the Celebration Band
Okay.
down the South Bay. So they had a worship band and a celebration band, and the celebration band went through a few different incarnations. But one was it was me and Larry Farkas, Doug Deem, Roger Martin, and Stephen James on drums.
Okay.
But the very first time I heard Master of Puppets I was with Larry. So we were hanging out, and he had this cassette, and he said, "Oh, this girl gave me this cassette. It's Metallica." So she said we have to listen to this, and that just the battery we stuck in there, and at the end of battery we were just like, wow, this is amazing. And I can't remember if that was probably before we joined Deliverance.
Okay.
Because Larry and I,
were you on the first record, or how many records were you on?
I was on the first one, and everything, all the recordings leading up to that.
Okay.
So
Breeding to Death, the demo.
Yeah, and we did something at MCF Records. We were gonna self-produce something that was with Larry still in the band, and so I think I'm jumping a little far ahead. I was thinking about musical influences and
I hear
you. How I got to listening to thrash because really before joining Deliverance, I didn't really listen to a whole lot of thrash. But
let me ask you, like, when you heard thrash, was it something you're like, man, this is the next wave I want to be a part of?
Yeah, because really there was a lot of the glam metal stuff that was kind of really popular for a while, and I liked a lot of it. And I used to hang out. I'd go see bands on Hollywood area a lot. Actually, all over LA. We'd go, whether it was Hollywood, South Bay, San Fernando Valley. We're going around. There's just lots of stuff happening all the time.
Yeah, because Orange County definitely at that time was definitely more the punk with, like, the Cuckoo's Nest and all that, where all the punk bands were playing. Social Distortion.
Oh yeah.
Black Flag, all TS.
Yeah. Just lots of stuff happening.
Yeah, which would have been a great time in music to have so many options. It would have been a great time in music.
Oh yeah. Do
you still consider yourself somebody who likes thrash and like aggressive, like extreme music, or is that kind of something you've shied away from over the years?
Oh no. I like a lot of different stuff, and that's the thing. From a young age, there was music always around, and a lot of different styles, and so it was just kind of a progression towards heavier and heavier, but I like all of it still. So I still listen to all kinds of music.
Yeah, I'm the same. I can listen to anything from old country to Elvis to reggae and ska to
yeah. Oh yeah.
I like a ton of different music. I'm not defined by the genre of when I was 14. You know what I mean? And don't get me wrong, at 14, I wanted the most extreme stuff out there, and especially being in a household where we would be very, very severely punished. I remember my mom catching me with, my friend gave me a South Heaven tape, and she freaked out, and I was like 2 weeks because of it, that kind of stuff. So I mean, even at a young age at the Christian bookstores, because I mean that's the only place you would be able to find Christian metal other than Stryper. I remember the first time, I think we grabbed the first Deliverance record, and oh man, like my mom, she let me buy it because it was in the Christian bookstore, but she did not like it. She did not think it was Christian. She didn't think that kind of music would ever be Christian, and that it would corrupt my soul. But my soul was corrected for good metal to begin with, so I wanted to hear it. But again, and not that you guys, I always hate it when people say that like you guys were the alternative, because you're not your alternative. You're your own band. You guys were good at what you did, no matter lyrical content or what, you know. So I always hate it when people are like you know, Deliverance was the Metallica of, you know, Christian, you know, whatever. Good, you know. I'm 40. I'll be 48 next week, and I still listen to the Christian metal that I grew up listening to because it's good metal. It has nothing to do with you know. I've said it a million times in my show. I love Deicide. I don't believe in Satan. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that I'm gonna not listen to their music because of their lyrical content. So,
Oh yeah, yeah. It's uh, I guess because that was that comparison to secular bands was common, and people would reach and stretch and try to fit somebody in with something, which was not necessary. But
yeah,
the only thing that I mean, yeah, of course there was huge Metallica influence, but also Slayer and Anthrax and
yeah,
all stuff, and Queensryche, right? And David Bowie. You hear it in
yeah.
Jimmy.
I know. Me and Jimmy have had the argument many times where I'm like, I get you love Bowie, man. Like, and I don't hate Bowie. He just was never an influence of mine, you know. Or you know, he's like, oh, Queensryche. I'm like, dude, Silent Lucidity was horrible. I hated that song, you know. Just I was never a big Queensryche fan, but you know, we just breaking each other's balls. But you know,
Yeah.
like I was telling this to Jimmy the other day. We were talking when we were seeing each other. I was like, especially the one thing Deliverance had that I don't think a lot of bands really had, especially in thrash, was you guys wrote monster guitar thrash riffs with like good breakdown, good. You know, you knew when to bring it faster and to slow it down. You know, like you guys had your. Honestly, I don't even consider you guys like Metallica or Slayer. I always thought you guys were more of like Exodus or Testament that could really bring the good, slow, kind of like moshy parts. You know, the part where you've been blazing, but then it slows down. You get that amp and you want to get in the pit and just have a good time. You know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Jimmy was the main songwriter, and it's Jimmy's band. It's uh, he's a good songwriter. Um, the first time I met Jimmy, he was 15 years old. Yeah, and I showed up at his door because Chris Hyde invited me over.
Mm-hmm.
I knew Chris uh, from there was this rehearsal studio out in Signal Hill. It was called Deacon Dog,
Right.
and so a lot of the Christian bands rehearsed there, and so um, I was there fairly often, and so Chris and I were talking one day, and he said, "Yeah, I'm in this. I'm starting a band with Jimmy Brown, and we need a singer." So he arranged for me to go down there. He didn't tell Jimmy.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I showed up, and Jimmy doesn't know who I am, and so I said, "Oh yeah, I'm here to audition to sing," and he's like, "What?" So he says, "Hold on." So he opens up the garage. We go in the garage, and we're talking about music, and he's showing me his music equipment. He starts playing, and he's just amazing. He's just blowing me away. He's got this Mesa Boogie stack with I think at the time he had this Mark One and with a 50-watt Marshall
Okay.
that he was preamping into the Mesa Boogie, because he had a bunch of stuff that was um, he was trying to emulate certain people's sounds, but he had an amazing sound, and so right from the start, you could tell right away, this guy's got so much talent,
Yeah.
and so it was cool. The other guys showed up after a while. They also invited a guitar player. Uh,
Nice.
it was so at the time it was Chris, and they had a bass player named Alan,
Right.
and so we hung out, and then we arranged to meet again at Deacon Dog, and I hearing Jimmy sing, it was like, why did you don't need a singer, you got Jimmy.
Yeah.
So, but we
Can I pause you 1 second, man? I
okay.
gotta turn off my sprinklers real quick. Give me 1 second, okay? Pause recording, and we're gonna. All right, so then you guys were going up to Signal Hill to jam and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and I think Jimmy and I clicked right away. We became good friends, and we I didn't join Deliverance at that time, but I hung out with them, went to some gigs. I think when Manny joined the band, that they had a gig up in Oxnard, and then I drove Manny up there.
That's my stomping grounds. I'm from Ventura.
Oh,
Yeah, Ventura Oxnard. I'll be back home in a week for 10 days, man. I can't wait.
well, cool.
But yeah, okay. So let me ask you this, and I mean, were you pretty committed as a Christian at the time when you joined in Deliverance, or were you just still kind of just?
At that point, I was, yeah, and it was just it was like I wasn't, and then I told you there were some influences, family influences I had, an aunt who was a big influence on me and would always give me Christian stuff, books, music, all kinds of things, and try to influence me, introduce me to people, introduce me to musicians. And so then certain things happen, and at some point I'm thinking, oh well, I need to do this. I need to get right. So I started making an effort to do that, and not like I was prepared. I was just this rocker kid who was started going to church, and
I think one of the big downfalls of Christianity is that they start grooming you from such a young age, where it's like I say, it's the Santa Claus effect. You're being good all year because you want Santa to bring you something. Mom and dad are saying, "Be
yeah,
good, Santa's watching you." In the same context, it's more of an afterlife kind of promise with Christianity. It's like, be good, do what Jesus says, because you're going to get these great presents when you die into the afterlife, without people really contemplating, man, is this real? Is this? I mean, and that's the thing. I've interviewed some people on my channels, and they've been out there and been claimed, crazy claims of healings and all this other stuff, and I'm just like, man, there's two options here. You're either crazy or you're a liar. You know what I mean? And I don't want to come off rude and just be like, dude, you're lying. But I mean, the psycho delusion of any religion is just something that, like, and it took me years to get over it. When I first started not even walking away, I still believed for a long time up until my mid-20s, because I was afraid to hedge my bets. I remember when it was probably 2004, Striper came to town, and I hadn't seen Striper since I was a kid. And went and saw them, and like, man, I got drunk at the show, and I went home, and my wife is awesome, and she's never been a believer, never been groomed in church. Does a lot of times when I tell her story, she's like, "That's not true." I'm like, "No, seriously, this really happened." I've heard church, record burnings and exorcisms and speaking in tongues, and she just will never really understand it, 'cause she didn't grow up with it. But I remember coming home, and I was like, man, I don't know, because I mean, it was one of those emotional things where it brought me back to a place where, man, it would be a great, amazing thing to have that kind of faith and to really have that assurance. But as we get old and we really look into the big picture of it, it's just a bill of sales that's not gonna, that nobody can tell you, me, or anybody that they have the bill of sale correct, because they don't know.
yeah, yeah. Besides the promise, there's the threats,
Mm-hmm.
and and that's a probably a bigger one, I think, with most people. I would say with all of them. They won't admit it, but that is the biggest, because they won't even question things. They're afraid to even think about questioning or thinking about something that might be different. People will shut down conversations about that really quick,
Right,
because the fear takes over.
Well, and it's not even. I think that's one of the fierce part of it, but also they don't like and I'm not talking about on people. I'm no better than anybody else, but especially I think when it comes to, like, I was trying to interview a bunch of people this weekend, and that portion of the show will be uploaded, as when this one gets uploaded. But asking just simple questions about faith, most people couldn't give me an answer other than it's faith. They couldn't tell me why it is or how it is, or and then I'd bring up like points of the Bible where it's inaccurate or doesn't make sense or allegorical, and they treat Jesus like he's George Washington that came over and fought the Revolutionary War. Where, man, this is thousands of years old with so many other contexts of other religions that have been bled into everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We got heavy there, but let me ask you this real quick, man. Okay, so you're on Weapons, man. Like you've done the first record, you're getting to do Weapons. You guys are on MTV, man. Things are going good for Deliverance at this point in time. What, and you don't have to, I don't care about names or people or events or whatnot, but when at your point, because you were on What a Joke, were you?
No.
Okay.
But I came back for a couple out after that.
Okay. So, but at what point in time were you like maybe saying to yourself, this is not my direction. I don't believe this anymore. I don't want to be part of this anymore.
It was let's say I was pushed out. Not my Jimmy.
Well,
no.
I mean, band members come and go. I've been in bands. I get it. Things, don't vibe with everybody. New members come and go. But was it a personal conflict or was it a spiritual conflict?
It was personal.
Okay.
And I think
I'm not digging on dirt, man. I'm not Jerry Springer. I'm not trying to like bring this down. Let's fight, but it's like, obviously at that point in time, Deliverance is a product and a business, and I always say that a lot of times with whatever people do in Christianity, if you're a ministry, that shit better be for free because Jesus never charged anybody. If it's a business, that brings a whole different level of everything into it,
Yeah. Well, there was well, there were just a lot of issues, and making it difficult to exist within that power system. It was and then there was also things said about me, which like I went to a gig and then people were asking me, hey, what happened? I'm still in the band, but
yeah.
But they were hearing that I wasn't from other people who were related to the band, and
directly in the band or just people maybe on the outside of the band?
It was kind of a combination. So let's just say it was just made really difficult for me to stay. Okay. And when I told Jimmy I couldn't stay, it caught him by surprise. He did not expect it. But it got to a point where I couldn't stay.
Mm-hmm.
It just progressed, so I didn't want to leave. I'd been in the band for since '86 when I joined with Larry, and so it just
Well, obviously, I can still see the pain in your eyes over it. You know what I mean? Really, I mean,
yeah.
There are some pains that it doesn't matter how much time goes away, that you're always going to feel that pain, and you're it takes you back to that place, and that's unfortunate, especially with people who are brothers in Christ, who something happens, he said, she said, whatever the issue may be. but then for whatever reason, you know, you're not living up to a standard of maybe not even what the band wanted, but people outside the band were expecting these people to be.
Yeah. Yeah. But you know, but the time that I was there, it was it was it was good. You know, I mean, people came and went. There were a lot of, you know how bands are. Bands are just, and as far as like thrash and influence and stuff, it kind of grew from that point when I joined Deliverance, because even um I didn't join a thrash band.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it kind of evolved after I joined. Jimmy would introduce songs, and it's just like, well, oh, that's an interesting direction for us to go, and then before we knew it, you know, it's like he'd play a riff, like, oh, that's really cool. Let's you know it, and you know, like
It's just where the road took you is that style.
yeah,
It feels
and
a
we do.
natural, you know, a natural progression. That's always the best thing. But like, you know, I've come to find out in the last few months we were doing this show and whatnot, like with Vengeance, how, you know, that was a Bob Beeman, you know, boy band that had been put together. I had never known that.
Yeah, well, you know, so I could say I was kind of around. I mean, I was around.
Yeah.
Doug and I were roommates.
Yeah.
You know, and I was also friends with Glenn, you know, Glenn Rogers, because
Yeah. And, you know, Larry,
Glenn was,
obviously.
so it was Doug, Glenn, um, Mike Betts from Neon Cross,
Right.
and Roger Martin, and that was the band, and they were looking for a singer, and at some point they had, you know, a couple of people come and go, um, and then I can't remember what happened. Glenn probably filled you in on,
Yeah.
if you guys talked about it, how
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
ended
Yeah.
up
That's,
leading.
that's, that's been documented with Glenn and well, you know, Roger, and I've had Roger Martinez on the show a few times. So,
Yeah, yeah. I saw some of those clips with Roger, and so 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 yeah. So at some point Bob got involved, and and then they brought in, I think they brought in Glenn Mancaruso,
mm-hmm.
who was around when I mentioned the celebration band, where there was a celebration band and a worship band. Glenn was playing drums for the worship band. Um, and so we were, you know, we're all kind of,
Yeah, I've laughed and told this to Jenny many times. I'm like, man, you know, the whole, you know, early metal scene or Christian metal scene in California was very what's incestuous. You know what I mean? Like everybody was hanging out with everybody in this band or this band or this band. Or,
yeah, oh yeah,
and if you
totally,
only had, you
totally.
know, 12 really great musicians that could pull that stuff off, everybody was just kind of like wife swapping bandmates, you know?
Yeah, it's kind of funny, because Doug and I, we had been in a band for a bit, and then um before that, I think that's, I don't know, it was just a lot of that, because then Larry and I started a band,
Mm-hmm.
and it was it was after he had been in Deliverance once, and Deliverance broke up, and then we started something, and then he said, hey, let's ask Chris to be our drummer. So then it was Chris Hyde and Larry and me,
Mm-hmm.
and and then uh and then Chris invited Jimmy down one day, and we talked about us. They wanted Larry, and Larry and Larry said, "Well, you know, I'm doing this thing with Brian, so he has to come with me."
Yeah.
And so that night, uh, after our rehearsal, Larry and I went to Guitar Center, and I was actually going to buy an acoustic guitar, but I ended up buying a bass. So,
Right.
and also that white Les Paul, the iconic white Les Paul custom that
Mm-hmm.
Larry plays.
Yeah.
We bought that same night.
Nice. That's a cool
And
story.
then we called Jimmy and said, "We're in." So
Nice. Nice. What was your take on the Christian music scene in LA back in the day? Like, like what did you think of it? Was it just I don't know, like because I mean, like I said, 1990 was the first Christian metal show. I went to a bunch of punk shows up in Oxnard and like a couple Christian, like, we saw Petra and Carmen and White Cross and, like Undercover and that kind of stuff. Steve Taylor, which I'm not bagging, love Steve Taylor. He's a great guy. But, like that Reseda show was my first, you know, parents drove me down, dropped me off. I was 14 by myself, hanging out, metalheads, and my mom was freaking out. You know what I mean? Because she'd never been to anything like that before. And George was there. Because I had first met George at Sanctuary when we would drive down, and he was super great. And Roger was great, and Biker James, who was their merch guy at the time, uh, was a great guy. And I think that's a lot of the. I look at all these memories so fondly because you have good music and youth involved into it, so therefore
mhm.
so much just freedom and looking towards the horizon, and your future is not set. You can do anything in your mind that you want to do, and still dig the music. But I don't know, just looking now and being in a band. I've been in bands, off and on, 20 plus years. I haven't been in one in the last like 7, just because I'm just kind of the dream I had will never be what the dream it was. So therefore, I'm just like I'm glad of the times I had, but I don't know. It just seems like when anything comes to ministry and then to profit, things always get messed up.
Yeah, I agree. I think at that point it was mostly about community,
Mm-hmm.
because it was kind of growing, but it was still small. So, like you said, everybody knew everybody. We'd go to all the shows to support all the bands, and we'd go to churches. Um, so sometimes I would go to Whittier, sometimes I would go to South Bay, sometimes I would go to Hollywood. Um, Went to a couple other ones too. I think out in Inland Empire they had one, in San Diego they had one. So so it was kind of this interconnection, and for the most part it was very positive. So of course, when things grow and things get bigger, things change, and it changed. But it was a lot of good memories, like you said, from back then, because it was just it was it it was a good community at the time. Everybody there were we were all young, and it was just this we're all there for well, music and church and whatever.
And that's the
But
thing. We have youth incorporated into being, very zealot and very on fire on something. Man, there's nothing, a 19, 20-year-old can't, imagine taking over the world, because not only do you have a community of people that are like-minded with you, but then also if you're having some divine, direction that's saying, hey, this is what, the Lord wants you to do. So therefore it's going to be amplified times 10, because you have that fired up zealot. Man, we got to take today for the Lord.
yeah, yeah, and that was kind of felt, definitely. But then also, because not everybody was part of the whole sanctuary thing, right? I had a different church that I would go to regularly, and sanctuary was kind of an add-on.
Okay.
And then with uh, Jimmy was more like what do they call it? Assembly of Gods,
Mhm.
kind of,
Yeah, the more
kind of
evangelical.
Pentecostal,
Yeah.
and then Chris was just deep Pentecostal,
Okay.
and so that created problems in the band sometimes, because
Different
because
theologies. Yeah.
Chris insisted that, like, I should be speaking in tongues, and I was like, well, and it hasn't happened, and I'm not going to fake it. I'm not going to pretend.
Yeah.
So if it happens, it happens, but it hasn't. So but you know, that kind of that.
Well, as we got, or even, even back then, you know, I said this one time, like, I remember when, I was, the Holy Spirit ascended upon me and I copied it, man. I faked it because I wanted to be more spiritual and be more accepted in the church. A parent can be a parent, all you have to do you know, is find the formula and go with it. I mean, and that's just, for me, the craziest is all this amazing supernatural stuff that God can do through a church, but then, he can't, heal sick people that are really sick,
Yeah.
I mean, we went, as a kid, we went to see, Benny Hinn and the Faith Healers and all that. And just, I always remember going and just being so, like, even at 13, 14, just knowing that this was wrong. There was something wrong here, that it wasn't real, that the show it was a great orchestrated show, but at the end of the day, there wasn't truth within it.
Yeah, and it's really sad because people who are looking for answers and looking for help get sucked into it.
They're looking for that miracle.
Yeah, yeah, because for whatever reason, other things haven't worked out, and they're at that point where they're desperate and they need something.
Well, and like I said, when I was interviewing people this weekend, there was a lot of very, very dull looks, a lot of they didn't know their religion, and I'm saying this 100% truth. I do not feel I'm better than anybody in any way, shape, or form. But it was funny. I was talking to one of the members of Deliverance. I'm not going to say who he was, but I was like, I finally kind of get these people that all they have is God. They have nothing else. I mean, they live, they're and this sounds so bad, and I'm not meaning it that way, because I mean, they're not smart people. They're kind of dull. They're working horrible jobs. They're maybe married with 3 kids that they can't afford, and they're struggling. And they're the one thing they have is they're hedging on a better afterlife, where they're not even worrying about the life they have here, where if they could do better, they would do better.
Yeah.
But, I mean, and I know I'm going to get fucking, comments on this. I'm just telling you people now, I'm not being an elitist. I'm not. I'm just saying that I understand that people of poverty or lower expectations, or just even just a different economic realm, I get why they're so about going to church, but then also the church is taking your 10%, where that money could be, put towards your family, and you shouldn't be giving it to the church, and all these. And I get it, man. These people are just, they're hungry, and they're really looking for something. They're looking for that miracle, and it's sad that they're being sold and false bill of goods.
Yeah, and it's true what you said about it starting at a young age. It's the indoctrination from where they're given these things that, if you were presented with this much later in life, you would say, no, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to believe that. But as a child, if you're told that these are the truths and the promise and the threats,
Yes.
It's deep inside, and it's not something that you can just turn off. It's not something you just let go of.
And even when you're able to overcome those, there are still things that linger with you. I call them spiritual scars, because the church and Christianity, and I'm not just saying Christianity, I'm talking Mormonism, Catholicism, Scientology, all these, absurd belief systems. They give you, if you're lucky enough, and I'd say this, lucky enough to be able to walk away from it and really take back your own mind, and 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 if you go back to it, that's really where your heart desires. That's great, man. And enjoy your spiritual journey. But I think the freedom of not having a deity of any kind is, and really living in a world that is about freedom for you and for me and the best for society. I think we're going to get such a better outcome than having these 2,000-year-old belief systems pushed into people that make it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this, and this, since we've been kind of getting heavy, man, like, what was kind of like your exit strategy? What was yours, like, and it doesn't have to be a mic drop, I'm out, let everybody know. But like mine was never that. It was a continual, slow pace until finally I said, okay, I'm free of this. I don't have to do this anymore.
That is exactly how it was for me, and I think it's pretty common because like I mentioned, you can't turn it off. You can't. It's not a choice. You can't choose to believe. You can't choose not to believe because it's so deeply ingrained. It's even if you say you don't, it's very possible that it's still there, and some people will go back.
I will say, for me, not going to happen. And it's funny because, George Ochoa, we were talking, and he's like, man, I know one day you're coming back. And I'm like, dude, you have a better chance of Jesus coming down and shaking my hand than me going back to that. Because for me, that was poisonous in my life. It wasn't uplifting. It wasn't helpful. It was poison. And whether people want to say that, different morals, different ethics, whatnot, being free of those rulings and those books, it actually has made me a better human being, because I think about the betterment of all of us, not just what God wanted his group to believe.
And you're not limiting yourself to thinking, well, I have this happening. My goal is what's going to happen after I leave this life.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it's kind of ironic because my goal was to get closer to God.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of so during that time, I had I'd been going to a lot of different churches, and plus with Deliverance, when we were on tour, we'd go to churches all over the place. We'd visit churches in the different cities. A lot of times it was the show might be sponsored by a church, or they were a connection in the city somewhere where we could stay, or somewhere, or sometimes we were performing at the churches. And so seeing all these different churches and people at different churches, and here you may be familiar with the estimates of how many different unique denominations there are just in the US, like between 30 and 50,000. At every church, I'd meet at least two people who would say, I'm only here because this is the closest to what I believe. If I had the resources, I would start my own church. So however many churches, however many denominations there are,
they want to split it off,
triple it, quadruple it.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to have their own church because everybody thinks God is speaking through them.
Well, that's the thing. If Christianity was real, we wouldn't have 30 different denominations. We'd have one truth, and we would, if God was real, we wouldn't have 45 pastors per town, or 500 churches per town, because there would be God would be able to say, hey, this is the vicar of Christ. He speaks for me. There would, I'm just saying, for me, I demand a lot more evidence in my life than most people. You tell me that you've played poker with Sasquatch, dude, I better see some fucking proofs. You told me you've boogie boarded with Loch Ness, man, you better show me the proof, because anybody can make a wild claim. Anybody can.
Yeah.
It's the proof is in the pudding that backs it up.
Yeah. And it's funny because I've heard some pretty wild claims.
I have seen my own pastors do some crazy wild claims where even as a teenager or even as a kid, I felt it wrong. I felt it not. This is not right.
Oh, here's another thing I just remembered. So I went to Calvary chapels too, a lot of them, and of course, ultimately, all these pastors learned from Chuck Smith. I'm sure it's different now since Chuck's not around, not with us anymore. But at several churches, I heard pastors tell a personal story that was part of their message.
Mm-hmm.
Personal story. This happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
This happened to me. Word for word, the exact same story.
Yep.
So it's probably something Chuck came up with and said, "Here, this is something that works for me."
Mm-hmm.
And since they're talking to their own congregations all the time, they're not expecting that it's gonna get around. But they're saying the same story as though it's a personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing was internet. so during my trying to get closer to God and then encountering people and trying to defend what I believed and um, knowing what was in the Bible and saying, oh, okay, well, I have an answer for this, but let me find an outside resource to back this up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? The outside resources did not back it up. I'd find explanations for things that and historical references and it was like, oh, wait a second, I really believe this was true, but maybe parts of it are true, or the names might be true, but the historical part is not true. This didn't happen. Yeah. And so it took probably about 10 years, and I had no idea it was happening until it was pointed out to me by somebody else. And then it was just like eyes open. It's like, oh, I'm you go into the tunnel thinking you're going to some destination, you end up somewhere else completely.
Yep.
So it was a total shock to me, but it was liberating. It was like, wow, this is good. This is a good thing.
Sure. Slavery of any kind, whether it's physical, mental, or spiritual, is not a healthy thing, and that's what I consider Christianity and all religions to be. Is a spiritual slavery that has entrapped your mind to where if you don't conform in these ways, you're not part of it. You're not sincere. You lack faith. You can't be a true believer because you question. And I think anything should be questioned. Everything should be questioned.
Yeah.
And I'm exactly the same way. I was chatting with a gentleman this weekend who runs Deliverance's merch, and he'd never encountered a person like me who grew up in the church and knew church and whatnot. And we were talking, and it actually kind of got me a little riled for a second, because he at one point was like, "I don't believe you believe what you believe. I think you're pulling our legs." And I literally had to stop him. I go, first of all, you don't know me. I understand that. But I go, secondly, I'm not a fake and I'm not a liar. I'm not here pulling a scam. You guys are already doing that enough for the lifetime. I don't need to pull a scam. Mm-hmm. I go, but you're questioning my integrity and my truthfulness. And that's more important to me than anything is my word. If I tell you I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And we were talking, and just the facts I was able to throw out to him, and it sucks when somebody obviously wants to believe something so bad, but when you throw truth in their face, and they all they can come back is faith. Faith is not good enough. It's not. Mm-hmm. Sorry. You need more than faith for me to. Okay, I'm gonna say, even if God exists, even if God is real, then let us examine the qualities of God. And God has so many human characteristics as a supernatural being that shouldn't have these characteristics. So therefore, are we just as good as God or better than God because we're able to overcome these narcissistic jealousy, hatred, all these other horrible things that God proclaims that's love, but it's not. It's about control, it's about fear, and that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it sucks. It's just a situation where, and I'm not opposed to religion. If being a follower of Jesus makes you a better person, that's great. Just, don't put it on my life and vote to where it affects people that are not Christians. And
it is. It's comforting for some people, and I think the people who are, there are a lot of good people out there, and it would be that way regardless of what they believe. So it has nothing to do with their belief. That's just who they are. But some of them will attribute those characteristics to their belief, even though it's not related.
You can still be a great person without these beliefs. You can.
Yeah. And as far as the characteristics of the God of the Bible, all the descriptions of him are very limiting. For what we might claim that, well, God is omniscient and omnipresent and all these other things, but not according to what's written. And then also, for example, gender. God is portrayed as male. Why limit God to one gender? Why shouldn't God be beyond all of that?
If God were real, he'd be beyond this form of sexual, flesh that we call male or female. We don't know what God is, and I said this to somebody I was talking to, and they got very offended about it. But also it's like, obviously we know the story of Thor, where he would come in at night as a golden eagle and impregnate women, and that's obviously where they got the story for Jesus's immaculate conception, because that came 500-600 years before that. But I was like, well, if this were the situation, God was a rapist. He sent an angel down to say, hey, you've been chosen. God's going to impregnate you. You're going to bear his child. You have no say in it. But that also goes back to 2,000 years where women are not important in the Bible. They are not. They are women. They're to know their place. They are to be the mothers, concubines, the servants. And as a woman, I would look at these stories and be like, man, God just, he doesn't respect women at all.
Yeah. And
we're going to get so many comments on this. Well, we're going to get comments, brother. This is going to be great. This is good. Dude, it's going to be like, I'll have there'll be like 10,000 comments, like, But look at Bathsheba. Look at the story of King David and Bathsheba. Her husband was David's best friend, and he continually tried to get him murdered so that he could bet his wife. And finally, do you think that Bathsheba had sex with David willingly? No, because he was her king, and she had to do whatever. And by the time she was pregnant, he finally got to kill his best friend so that he could wed his wife out of shame. What kind of fucking story is that?
Yeah, and the thing is, their excuses are made for those. They say, well, it shows the humanity of David, or the forgiveness of God, or all these whatever you want to insert there. But there's always an excuse for the horrible stories.
We don't know what God's plan is. Who are we to judge God? I'm very much in my realm to judge what this person is doing in life.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's just one of those things where Everybody can just have, if you want to have your idea, have your idea. But when you call it faith and you call it a belief, it's so much harder to even have a conversation with somebody, And I'm willing to talk to anybody if anybody can show me complete real evidence. And I know I'm going to get comments on this. I want evidence, people. I don't want your story of faith. I don't want your stories that went back 2,000 years. You show me how your living God does, works in your life, and not in a sense of we got to work, we pay our bills. Like life just is what it is. Show me something miraculous that God has done.
There are some because I spend so much of my lifetime with that being part of my life. I, however we want to put it, yeah, as a believer, it still interests me. I mean, the whole, but from a different perspective. And so there's a lot of resources out there that when from the Christian perspective, when they want to say things about the accuracy and how archaeology and history proves it, it's from people who with the belief going to look, trying to make what they find fit.
Yes.
But when the work is done from the opposite direction, from saying, okay, well, this is what we found. Let's continue to search and see what story it tells, and which is what true archaeology is, true science is. We're looking for answers.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot more out there from the time when I first realized I no longer believed. It was about 2001.
Okay.
And but I knew I kind of felt this decrease. Someone said to me something right around that time period, like, "Oh, do you even believe in God anymore?" And it wasn't directed towards me. It was their own kind of thinking out loud. Or is there even a God?
Yeah.
And I said, I made a comment. Well, if there is, it's not the God of the Bible. And at this point, I hadn't identified as a non-believer yet. I still called myself a Christian. But since then, lots of things have been written since then, and just a new outlook, a new perspective on the actual history, and also the motivations for writing certain parts of it, and how it was kind of creating a history. For example, a large part of the first books, probably from Genesis up to maybe First Kings, were all written around the 7th century BC. And it was to unify a group of people, because the idea behind this and the history behind this is, well, as you probably know, Israel was ceased to exist around 1200 BC. I think 1200, 1600, one of those. But the Assyrians conquered them, and then they kind of dissipated and never recovered. Judea, at that time, Israel was more prosperous economically. Judea was more rural, but then by the 7th century, they started building their economy to build trading with other areas, and so I'm kind of
like commerce is
but there were still remnants of other groups around. So these were written to try to build a history, create a history that would unify them, but still keep Judah as the central main part and people in power. So now looking at all the Old Testament stories before that, you see how Israel was always failing and always opposing God, and God was always punishing Israel. And Judea, you look at everybody from Judah in this, from David all the way to Jesus. That's all Judah, right?
Yeah.
And so the stories were all built for that purpose. And so you could think of it less as history and more as propaganda,
Yeah.
including the New Testament, the Gospels,
Mhm.
and for another example, Daniel was written to motivate a certain action at the time it was written. So you've got three parts of it. You've got when Daniel lived, and he's telling his story and the history, and then he's prophesying to a certain time period, and then he's prophesying further. Well, the first prophecy area is the time period that it was written, so everything fits, everything is accurate. So if they said, well, Daniel wrote this 300 years ago, look how accurate his prophecies were. And then he goes on to prophesy further. So the history part of it is all wrong,
Yeah.
and the future part of it is all wrong. But that one time period that was written to convince the people, hey, you need to listen to this. We just discovered this. We just discovered it, and that's kind of how it was with the other stuff, the books of Moses and whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm sure lots of people will hate me for saying all this, right?
There's also
But
the same way with the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Even
yeah,
Christian historians don't know who exactly wrote it. They don't know
mhm.
what text it came from, what year it came from, and the resurrection story has 4 different stories within each of those books. So then, which one's correct? You know?
Yeah. And so those were written in a style they call Hellenist fiction. Um, they were all written anonymously. The names were given much later. The order is not the order they were written. Mark was written first, and then for criticisms of Mark, Matthew kind of addresses those, and so on, right? So that's, and I know you know all that, but it's this pattern, right?
Yeah, but there's
It,
also this undenying, stubbornness and steadfast of that. It's infallible. It's a story written by men.
yeah,
It's not divine. Even when people say, "Well, it was God's hand writing these words," no, especially in the term of free will. If we have free will from what God gives us, how do we know those people didn't, not listen to God and put their own twist on it? One of my favorite ones is, the story of Egypt and the slaves, and this caused quite a bit of controversy. I don't remember the archaeologist's name, but he was an Egyptian, actually an Israeli archaeologist who did a massive study of that, and even as a Jew, he came out saying this story never happened. There was no way you could. First of all, from Egypt, if they would have escaped, they would have went the northern route, which was way way faster, and they would have been out like that. So why would they take the southern route, which would take them days and days? And plus, a max exodus of over 2 million people, you would see civilizations, you would see proof, you would see camps, you would see the proof of this mass exodus. And this wasn't a Jewish archaeologist. They came back. He goes, "This story was not written to be literal. This was a allegorical story of triumph." And that gave, and I'm not anti-Semitic at all, but it's just one of those things. That same different scientists that actually measured the size of the ark for the 2x2. There is no way that would have worked. And not even that. How are you going to back then? How would they know who a male Black Widow and a female Black Widow would have been, or whatever? I mean, these are stories that are to be encouraging and to be uh, to give you some sort of purpose. And
yeah,
it's just funny how these people take, like what you're saying, everything in such a historical context where they will sign for it. They're like, you don't know you don't know the truth. You don't know the science. It's like what you're saying, like as a scientist, it's about finding the truth. You're not having a preconceived notion of I have to make this fit this. So therefore you're gonna falsify, or I'm not gonna say lie, but possibly just not do your research the way you're trying to make this conclusion where for what you want it, not other than just having conclusion work.
Yeah. Yeah. It all written for a purpose to get some kind of reaction or motivation, action.
Let's be honest, in this day and age, man, it's about to get your money. That's what it's about. It's about the church taking your money, and I'm listening to a really good podcast right now about the founding fathers and basically the separation of church and state, how our country is not based on founding fathers. And if people really knew their research, I mean, it wasn't until the 50s with McCarthy era where they were looking into the atheist communist aspect of it, that we put in God we trust in our money, and one nation under God and our pledge of allegiance. There are so many other things that before 1954, which we know now is just American apple pie, like the good era, but people just they don't want to hear it, and and the sad thing is they're comfortable not wanting to know.
Yeah.
They're very complacent and not questioning. Question everything, guys, man. Break up your foundation, man. Mess stuff up, and if that foundation is strong, it'll still be the same foundation when you're done. But if you know that it's probably not going to fold up, or you might need to build a new foundation, well, maybe that's just the time in your life to start anew.
Yeah. Yep. And it comes down to the fear again, because shaking things up, starting anew, rejecting what you think what you believe is your foundation. Those are difficult things to do,
and they're hard and they're scary. I understand it. When I started shaking my foundation, I was terrified. I was terrified that I was wronging God, and I was wronging my future, and I was going to be damned because, if as a parent, if I had a daughter, and I am a parent, if my kids came to me asking questions, I would never want them to be afraid of asking a question. Why should we be afraid of God just because we want to ask a question or seek a different truth? And if that truth is infallible, and it is truth, it will always lead to truth. Always.
And that's the thing with studying, learning. Yeah. And I think I was discouraged from choosing that path academically, because I was warned, people who do that often become atheists. This is and but I've well, that's kind of what happened to me independently of that. But I've talked to other people, pastors, who got to that point and had to make a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And they described it. They described it as torturous. It was they're shaking their foundations. They're what they believe so deeply, they're at this point where if they go further, they're going to have to abandon it.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them have taken that step forward, and others drew back.
Yeah.
And those who drew back didn't say the reason. It's apparent from the way they describe it that it was intense fear, and they didn't want to go forward. Mm-hmm. But the way they might describe it is that their faith was stronger, and maybe that's true. Maybe you could interpret it either way. You could say, well, the faith took over, and the truth, the facts didn't matter because they needed to.
I call that they shut down their brain and didn't want to continue, and they just said, "I'm just going to leave it to fate." I can't deal with these questions, so therefore I'm going to shut off, and I'm just going to leave it up. I have my faith, and that will get me through what it needs to get me through.
Yeah.
Which is not a great option for either. It's never a good option.
Yeah. And you've probably heard of pastors who've gotten to that point and they've been pastors their whole life, and what were they going to do? And so they remain pastors, they keep it to themselves, and they try to do the best they can for the people
But
who
also,
are
I don't think it's about community and or actual salvation. I think it's about a paycheck. The quick story. When we moved around a lot. We lived in Colorado Springs a few times, and our pastor of our church was none other than the infamous Ted Haggard. Do you know who he is?
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah, okay.
I remember Ted.
Oh yeah. So Ted was our when we first moved to Colorado. He had a smaller church, and then we moved away back to California for a while and came back. And he had the mega church.
Did
Mega church. And so years later, this would have been, and I remember I used to like sitting next to my father for church because my dad, even though now he's gotten older, he's definitely reverted more to evangelical. But when I would sit next to my dad, and my dad would be like, "Don't listen to this. This is dumb. This isn't real." Like this is a good story. It's a good moral, but it's in hindsight. But so I'm at work one night, and my father calls me, and it's like 2008. He's like, "You watching the news?" I'm like, "No." So he's like, "Turn on the news." So I turn on the news, and it was when the story broke with Mr. Haggard, getting, basically busted for having homosexual encounters with a male prostitute doing methamphetamines up in Colorado.
Mhm.
And my point with that is going to church, he was so vehemently anti-homosexual. He
Yeah.
preached that all the time. All the time. And so a few years later, there was a documentary from Nancy Pelosi's daughter, can't remember her name, but it was called The Trials of Ted Haggard. And so it followed him around when he was exiled from Colorado Springs, and they were living in other people's houses, and he was trying to find a job. And I will say my heart went out to him at one point because they were moving into some shitty hotel, and you could tell he was wrestling with things. You could tell he was fighting things.
Mhm.
And, basically his quote was, I just don't, I'm out here working my ass off. I just don't want my family to be poor. Okay, I understand that. You don't want your family to go without. But then he moves back to Colorado Springs and opens up another church called St. James Gate or something like that. He's not going back to the word because, in my opinion, I could be wrong. He's not going back to the word because it's the word, and he's redeemed because he doesn't want to be poor.
Yeah.
And that's what he knows. He even said it on camera. He's like, I have a bachelor's in religion from some Christian Bible that means nothing in the secular world.
Mhm.
Nothing. And he was trying to sell insurance and doing jobs. And I never thought he was a bad person. I never thought he was a mean person, but the hypocrisy that comes with these people in power. And then, and then just to, I'm gonna start up the same fucking scam when I get back because and I understand I don't want if I had one skill set and that's what made me money to make sure my family had a great life, immoral or not, I would do it. If I was an amazing drug dealer and could, or a gangster or racketeer or whatever, anything illegal or immoral, and I was amazing at it, so my family didn't suffer, I would do it because I want my family to be taken care of. I understand it. But when you have people's fucking hopes and fears of eternity mixed in with this, then that's the lowest form of scumbaggery.
Yeah. Yeah.
It really is. And it's the Benny Hiddens, the Jimmy Swaggarts, Kenneth Copeland's, Pat Robertson, shit. I mean, Jim and Tammy Baker,
Mhm.
Olsteins, all these. It's these people about this. It's not about salvation. It's not. Because salvation would be free. Jesus would have condemned all of these people. And if Jesus were real and he came back today, he would throw the temple away. He would be like, you people are not of what my teachings are. And how is it that we're taught in the Bible, like It's more likely for a rich man to go to heaven than, through the eye of a needle, but the more promised gold and eternity and mansions. It's because they want people to say, hey man, I had it bad in this life. I want it good in the next one.
Mm-hmm.
It's true, my friend. It's true.
Yep.
And like I said, things get heavy on the show. I don't mean it, but it's just the my thing of the show, believe it or not, just think about what you believe in. Think about it. Question, read, do some research. And if your truth comes back to your truth, then man, enjoy that life. Have a great life with it.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's a lot easier to just believe what you think you believe, or believe what makes you feel comfortable, and not find out anything about it. Uh, so talking to people, they're very confident in what they believe, but what they believe is often what they've created themselves,
or what they've been regurgitated eating by this person, that person, this record, especially like, me and Jimmy and, no, it wasn't Jimmy, it was George when I interviewed him. We got into a very pretty serious, especially about, in the 90s with, and then, I'm not talking shit on Deliverance. I think it's a great record, but with This Present Darkness, and there was, something him and Jimmy put out about actual spiritual warfare. And I'm like, do you know how many people in the late 80s and 90s were convicted wrongly of satanic panic abuse? I've done the research. I had a whole show about it where there was an FBI agent, I can't remember his name, 3,000 incidents, not one was real. Then, the Macmillan, they were at preschool, the first one in Southern California, where they were, accused of satanic rituals and abuse. They were sent to prison for 12 years, found out had nothing to do with it. The worst, the biggest one is the West Memphis Three. If anybody, have you ever heard of them?
I don't think so.
Okay, man. There's a whole on HBO Max. There's their whole 3-series documentary. It was these kids in '92 in West Memphis they weren't bright, they were poor, they loved metal, and 3 kids got murdered and mutilated, and they were sent to death row because they thought that they were Satanists. And comes out it wasn't any one of those 3 kids that did this shit. After 25 years, they finally did an Allen agreement, which meant I'm guilty, but I'm going to sign this piece of paper so I can get my freedom. Because if they would have continued fighting it, then they could have, the main guy, Damien Eccles, he would have maybe been executed before the trial was over. These 3 dumb kids at 16, 17, 18 spent 25 years in prison for something they did not do, because the Christian media and the hype of this whole there's satanic groups out there snatching up your kids, molesting them, murdering them, was not fucking true.
Yeah, I remember all of that. It was huge. I mean, I don't remember that particular story, but
No, but I'm just saying, like,
satanic panic.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the aunt that I told you about, she gave me some stuff about that, and some of it it just sounded totally outrageous. Just like,
well, I mean,
this is real.
And Sally Jesse and everybody. The only person that has not come out and actually apologized for the sensationalism was Geraldo. Oprah, Sally Jesse, everybody else that had those kind of shows over the years have come back and been like, we were misinformed. We created hysteria. We've apologized for it. Geraldo, not so much. Fuck you, Geraldo. But no, I mean, there tons of cases where people that, had nothing to do with anything, because these Christian psychologists would plant memories into a 3-year-old's brain, and coach them into saying what they were saying, and I will never discard abuse. If you're abused, man, that sucks. I get it. And I hope you get treatment and justification for it. But the amount of people that were accused and persecuted and imprisoned, people, hear me right now. They were imprisoned because of this fucking idea that you and your church kept moving forward with. Years of their lives away from their families, no freedom, no Christmases, no hanging out in backyards on 4th of July. Years of these people's lives were taken away because of your crazy bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
It sucks.
Yeah.
And we got real quick, Brian. I'm sorry. But again, I don't think religion is a bad thing. I really don't. When it comes to a one-on-one interpretation and experience of how you want to live your life, I don't think religion is bad. I think when you get tons of fucking people together saying we are all unified in this one idea and it cannot be directed or dissected or interpreted any other way, and that's where the danger starts.
And there's always the grabs for power and the exploitation and and then the scapegoating.
Totally. One quick one too. Do you remember a Christian comedian named Mike Warnke?
Oh yeah.
Okay, the guy that said he was in Vietnam and got blew up. Then he was a satanic high priest and all this.
Mm-hmm.
It's all been fucking found that he lied about everything.
I know, that was
everything.
One of the things my aunt gave me when I first, a teenager, gave me some Mike Warnke tapes, and I thought, wow, this is quite the story. And I think I even read what was his book, Satan Seller? Was that?
Yeah, the Satan Seller. Yes.
Yeah, and then found that all of it was just
adulterous, tax evasion, so many other things where it totally just destroyed his life. But no, I'm sorry, the government destroyed his life for being a fucking liar. Also, and this is not a joke, Brian. I'd be picked up from mom at like 3 o'clock. Every day on the ride home from school. Who did we listen to? Bob Larson. Come on, buddy. Man, we need 5 champions of $595. We need it. You need to fight Satan. And I will say, you have to listen to, and anybody here that wants to, listen to, I think it's the second interview with Jimmy. He talks about when they went out there and confronted Glenn Benton on from DSI. And dude, I've done security for Glenn. Glenn is, he's a sanist in the sense that he's a humanist, but it's just the fear mongering. They're like, don't let your kids listen to this. That's the thing I was trying to say is when I was talking to George about this, and he got a little mad about me. I was like, you cannot tell me in your heart of hearts the spiritual warfare that you really thought was a day-to-day battle. He's like, oh yeah. I'm like, come on, man. And I love George, man. He's a cool guy. We just hung out. We had a great time. But I'm like, man, and Jimmy even said when he was reading This Present Darkness and the other book from Frank Angeli, when he wrote This Present Darkness, it's an allegorical thing. It'd be no different than if I wrote a book about Bob Larson's Abaddon, No, it frustrates me at times. It does. And hey, my Christian friends, hey man, I love you. I got no beef with you. Let's hang out. Let's have a drink. Let's talk. Let's get to a point where if you want to have your religion, that's great, man. Just keep it off my fucking government. Keep it out of what I'm legally allowed to do, and in my schools. And you know what? We'll have no beef, man. Go fucking, I don't know, pray to Jesus and I don't know, whatever the fuck you want to do. Yeah, I know, man. You got that look. You got that like. And the thing is, this is never gonna. There's no easy solution. There's no easy answer. It's not like by tomorrow we should be like, all right, everyone we're cashing into atheists or we're cashing into Catholicism or whatnot. this is going to be, you know, a fight 200 years from now. It's always going to be a fight. But us as liberal people who have an open mind, then we have to stay in the fight, because if we don't, the evangelical fucking right wing, they're going to come for us, and they're going to make life. They're going to make hard for the people that need it.
Yeah. I know it's happening. It's been happening. It's been progressing.
You know, since Falwell in 1974, he even said he thought it would take 100 years to get where they wanted to be. It only took them about 42.
Yeah.
We have to fight these people. We have to fight them, because otherwise we're going to be living in some crazy indoctrinated Christian fucking state, and that's not what our founding fathers wanted at all.
No. Oh no. That's another thing. You know, it's like with all these different denominations. Say it was declared we're a Christian nation. We're a Christian nation. Now, which Christian is right?
Exactly.
And then that battle starts.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like it wasn't there before, because that was part of the motivation. I mean, besides the Church of England and whatnot, you've got the state and church intertwined, but there was hostility, physical hostility between the different denominations before. It's like, okay, well, we can't have that in our government. We got to keep that out. And unfortunately, it was worded very poorly, and you know, that's
honestly, I don't think it was worded poorly. I think that the religious right, I think they are rewording it. They're trying to rewrite and reword history for their benefit. Yeah. And we actually know, like I said, I'm just listening to this podcast right now about, you know, Christian nationalism and how it really didn't start till the 50s. You know, before then there was abortion was not an issue. Catholic, Christian, whatnot, you know.
Yeah.
And it's a fight, people. We just, it's going to take people like me, people like Brian, you know, and I'm going to say this to the people, and I'm not going to say names, but there are Christians that I've talked to that believe exactly what I believe, but they don't want to say it because it affects what they do.
Yep.
And I'm not trying to hurt nobody, but also at the end of the day, this country is about liberty and freedom. It's not about a totalitarian system that is in favor of the rich or the religious or the white or the black. It's about all of us as a community, and that's where it should be a community. Heathens, atheists, Christians. We should be striving for a country that's best for everyone.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's what a lot of people. Well, they're taught. It's the individualism. Well, yeah, we're individuals, so we're part of a bigger community, and the community doesn't exist without all of us, and we individually need the community to exist.
Yeah, we're not. We're not Marxists. This should be a free democratic state.
Yeah,
and you should be free to pursue your life, liberty, and pursue happiness the same way I should.
Yeah, and you know, I'm trying to figure out how to frame this, but we could say if the wealthiest, super wealthiest people looking for control, or anybody in between, there's just control, and religion is a good way to control. You think about the relationship between those and all the different civil rights movements, whether it's labor or it's you know, all of it. We can just go on and on and name all of it, but but those people who are like us, working people, and trying to get whether it's a fair wage, working conditions, health care, uh,
Yep.
get safe working conditions, uh, 8-hour days,
Don't
right
bring
to
it.
vote.
Yep. Yep.
Those things weren't given easily. They weren't given at all. They had to be fought for,
Yep.
and who fought them? And the people in power. The people in power who wanted to hang on to the money,
Yeah.
the wealth.
The Rockefellers.
Yeah. And what did they use? They used the press. They used the police. They used the military at times.
These politicians.
Yeah. And throughout the history of those struggles, we have those things because those people fought against the powers that were fighting against them. But then that's been kind of distorted as well. It's saying, well, I've heard people say, well, that you have safe working conditions because the corporations wanted that. I've heard people arguing that. Are you kidding me? So
nobody's read fucking Human Farm from the 1920s. Seriously, the meat complex. Like, they didn't give a shit, man. They wanted the most. Why do you think we have the most iconic fucking food in America, Nathan's hot dogs? Because he would not settle for sub-quality meat. He went out and found a butcher that was reliable, that was credible, and had ethics to make him his brand of hot dogs in the early 1900s. Because everybody thought a hot dog before then was fucking trash food. It was made of horses and rat and sewer and alligator. And you know what? He worked his nuts off to make that shit work.
Yeah, and there was one president, and in this case, it was a president who initiated some good change. I mean, there were several. I mean, like you think of Roosevelt and all
Theodore and Teddy and Franklin Roosevelt.
Yeah,
very good.
But it was a visit. I think he was invited to visit a facility of meatpacking or sausage something, and he was so appalled by what he saw that he was disgusted.
Yeah.
That it initiated some legislation for regulations, and the whole idea about fighting regulations. Oh, get rid of regulations. It's we need the regulations. The regulations to keep us safe.
Well, and it's crazy, especially like all these aging, in the 80s, these punk rock kids, metalheads that have turned into these fucking Fox Trump supporting. Like, you guys not remember the 80s? Like, Reagan, he raised taxes 11 times in 8 years. He defuncted all of the mental health industry. People couldn't get the health care they needed. Wasted millions and trillions of dollars on Star Wars. Wasted tons of millions of dollars on the fight against crack cocaine, which I will say, in the words of Ice Cube, I didn't have a plane. How the fuck did that shit get to my fucking neighborhood? It's what they were.
Not even. You know how it got there.
Yeah, we were funding a weird little subsurgent area in Palestine and Pakistan to fight the Russians, the Taliban, which we trained Osama and his people. Not only that, Reagan lied about the trading weapons for arms and let all the North go down. Said, not even that. Also, the AIDS epidemic, he didn't start signing funding until 1986, 1987, when that epidemic had been going on 10 years and people were dying, and he didn't give a shit about them because they were fucking gay people. So you know what?
Yeah, or at least they thought.
They were. Oh, not even that. He broke down so many laws so that therefore are regulations. So that's why we don't have American companies anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, yeah. If they can, yeah, exactly.
Oh, but you know what?
That's
Keep voting that way, people. See, because they don't care about the working class. They're killing the working class. There is no working class anymore. How are my kids going to afford to buy a home when homes are $500,000 a piece? They make $14 an hour. They're down. They're you know loaded with school debt.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
And then you've got, well, of course, it's all the misinformation, disinformation that's out there, and affecting people's outlook on everything. Like the whole idea about minimum wage.
mm-hmm.
That, oh well, minimum wage jobs are for teenagers in high school.
No,
No, anybody who's working needs to have their
have a
you're
living
paying.
wage. Well,
Exactly.
especially
That's what it started out. That's what it was intended to
yeah.
be.
Well, and especially with all these Republicans going on about immigrants and immigrants. I'm telling you this, America, if we didn't have the hardworking immigrants we have in this country, we would have no produce because, we have spoiled white people that are not going to work for $4 an hour. I grew up in California. I see the Mexicans that show up at the strawberry fields and the celery fields and whatnot that start working at 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. for $4 an hour. It's not their fault. You start taxing that fucking guy who's raking the system and doing slave labor. He's the one that needs to pay. It's not them. They're coming over working their nuts off trying to make a better life for themselves. Seen it, grew up with it. It pisses me off. I wasn't worth that hard for $4 an hour. Dude, like seriously. If they're like, yo, man, you're gonna go out and pick, strawberries for 14 hours for $3 an hour, I'd be like, no, man, you got the wrong guy. I'm not doing that, And that's the thing, you know. And I'm not saying that there aren't bad people coming over. We have just as many bad white, black, Hispanics, Indians. It doesn't matter where you're coming from. If you're a bad person, you're a bad person. But don't fall for this where we're just letting criminals and thieves into our country. Because you know what? We've kind of been doing that with corporations for many, 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 many hundreds of years. You want to talk about the thieves? Talk about the people in power. Those are the thieves.
Oh yeah, yeah. Anybody else who's doing crime may have for whatever reason they're doing crime. It's small. It's peanuts compared to the big bucks, right? The white collar, the corporations, the intertwining of corporations and some government agencies, like you were mentioning before with the whole Iran Contra thing.
Yeah. How many people in Belize or Nicaragua or South America have we helped in the last 30 years in Cuba get rid of so that we could have a landing spot there, so that we could have something that area was giving us that we need. Sorry. All right, we got crazy. We got crazy on that. So, all right, man, I'm gonna let you go because I'm gonna get some stuff done. But Brian, man, it was a pleasure fucking talking to you, my friend. You were great.
It was great talking to you, Simon. Thank you very much.
You're so welcome, man. And if you don't, do you still talk to Jimmy at all?
Yeah. Cool. In fact, I just talked to him. I think right before you contacted me.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to reach out and tell him thank you for the hookup. And again, man, thank you for doing the show. Again, this is an anomaly, people. This is the second atheist I've had on the show. Oh, man. We're going to have to maybe rename the show.
It was Roger, right?
Yeah, and Roger. So,
yeah, Roger's a good guy.
Roger's a grown fucking entity, man. I put him.
He's intense.
But, man, thank you, my friend. I appreciate you coming out and supporting and once this gets edited, I'll let you know what's up, and please share it and like and subscribe, my friend. And man, if I hopefully one day I'll get to see Deliverance and you can come out and jam a few songs with them.
That would be cool. Maybe
that'd be super cool.
Yeah.
Better do. It's got to be off Weapon, so that's. I will say when I saw them, they played Flesh and Blood, which I love that song, but my favorite song off that album was Slay the Wicked. So.
Oh yeah, that's a cool.
Yeah. I know. They're going to slay me.
You
All right. You have a good night, brother. Take care.
too, Simon.